Welcome to Flames of Knowledge, a CFSI podcast where we analyze federal policies, spotlight leadership, and tackle issues that matter to the fire and emergency services. Stay informed, stay engaged, and let's get to work.
Welcome to CFSI's podcast. I'm Michaela Campbell, Executive Director of CFSI, and today we are talking about FirstNet. In this episode, I'll be joined by Chief Jeff Buchanan to discuss how FirstNet was created, where it stands now, and what fire and EMS professionals need to know about FirstNet today. Chief Buchanan is the Associate Director of Market Strategy and Development for FirstNet and a retired fire chief with more than 25 years of public safety and government experience. He previously served as fire chief for Las Vegas Fire and Rescue and North Las Vegas Fire Department, where he led large organizations, managed significant budgets, and responded to major incidents, including the Route 91 shooting, while serving with Clark County Fire Department. Chief, thank you so much for being here today.
Michaela, it's a great honor for me to be here, and I'm excited about the conversation.
To kick it off, let's get started. To set the scene a little bit for our conversation, why should fire and EMS professionals care about this conversation that we're about to have today about FirstNet?
Great first question, and love the opportunity to answer it. At the underpinning of most challenges that face first responders and public safety is communications. It is vital on any incident for first responders to have excellent, reliable communication. So at the end of the day, it is literally the number one thing that has to happen in order for to keep a community safe or to mitigate any emergency incidents. So for fire and EMS, having FirstNet, which is reliable, purposeful, and I know we're going to get into it later, you have what's called priority and preemption, which is the ability to combat any congestion, so to speak, is vital for them to do their job.
I could not agree more. And I know that you also, as discussed, come from a fire service background. So can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you kind of segued into your current role?
Sure. Yeah, I started in the fire service in 2001. So, and there's a reason why I'm going to talk about 9/11 in a second, and I get a chance to expand upon it. So 9/11's got a very personal impact to me. I don't know this to be true. I say that it is true. I graduated on 9/13/2001. So I like to say that me and my compadres were the first graduating class of firefighters after 9/11. Do I have that in solid information? No, but how many firefighters graduated 2 days later? The reason that was impactful for me is because it was the greatest accomplishment of my life at that point. I think greater than my bachelor's degree. And my mom and dad couldn't come because there was no flights, right? We couldn't, all the airports and airliners were shut down. 9/11 will play a role in FirstNet later down the road as we get into the conversation. But my fire service career was so rewarding, so fulfilling, and I had the ability to just get trained in so many different ways and had the ability to serve in so many different roles and meet great people. And one of the great people who's a good friend of mine to this day was the current fire chief at the time. His name is Al Gillespie, and he was the IFC president. As we moved along in our relationship, and he was fire chief and I worked for the department, and he was working on something that was really, really important called FirstNet. So I learned about FirstNet in its true infancy and when very few people knew about it. So I was exposed to this thing called FirstNet, and I really got behind this meaningfulness. Well, fast forwarding through my career, I succeeded him as fire chief. I did ascend as city manager. I went over to Clark County, and lo and behold, I'm at Route 91. Guess what? I was trying to use my cell phone at the scene, could not get through. Why? FirstNet had not been born yet. Segue over to my career at Las Vegas Fire and Rescue, where I was fortunate enough to serve again for a great organization. I knew it was time for me to kind of pursue another challenge. And for me, as you know, we spoke earlier, and I'm going to use this kind of same group of phrases. It's very cliche. There's a lot of metaphors and feel good, but I need to be a part of a mission-driven assignment. And that's what FirstNet is. I'm mission driven. I get to support the men and women who are supporting their communities every day. I'm not on the front lines anymore. That time has passed. I'm grateful for my past, but now I get to do it in a different way through FirstNet.
Well, we certainly agree with you on mission driven here at
Yeah.
Congressional Fire Services Institute, a fire service nonprofit that is driven by the support of many, but also by just the love of the industry and the career and the people. So you're exactly right. It's the people that bring you back every day. So it sounds like we owe a lot to Al Gillespie and kind of bringing you in and keeping you in. But when did you move over to FirstNet?
I retired from the fire service in 2022 and did some consulting work. So I was working with supporting FirstNet from, at arm's length, but full time I started in 2024, March of 2024. So I've been working just over 2 years full time, but I feel like I've been a part of the program for over a decade. So I got to see it from its embryonic stage to where it is now, and to be a part of hopefully where it gets built out into the future. But the easy answer to your question is full time FirstNet bill with AT&T in my role just over 2 years. So I'm a new person. I'm a new guy. So, but it's been great.
Well, and as somebody who's really been with FirstNet in a variety of ways and from a variety of perspectives for a while, for some of the folks listening who may only know the name, what is FirstNet?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to my initial kind of entry into this conversation talking about 9/11. We all know what 9/11 was. There's many things about 9/11, all those lives that were lost that we will never forget. One of the opportunities that came from 9/11 was a recognition of a huge issue, an issue in communications. There were many, many first responders from different agencies, and it was clear that they were doing good work, but they were all operating in silos and had great, great, great challenges in interoperability. So, based on the event of 9/11 and how mitigating that incident took place, the 9/11 Commission was born to say, hey, let's evaluate this. How can we be better? And what, among other things that came out of the 9/11 Commission, was the need for there to be a national public safety broadband network, one exclusively for them, not one that they could use once in a while, one that's for them. And so that was super important. And so, in order to do that, the Middle Tax Relief Act and Job Creation Act of 2012, there came funding for there to be this arm of government called FirstNet, First Responder Network Authority. And their charge was going to be to find someone to build this network. And that's what happened. So what happened is Congress, they put this legislations into play. The First Responder Network Authority is built, and now they go out to RFP, a long 25-year RFP, where, believe it or not, AT&T was the only telecommunications major carrier to put in for it, and it was a risk for them. And they got it. They were awarded this bid, this 25-year public-private partnership that's been super successful. But there's some components to this that was really, really important. One of them is that the way the seeding for the money, if you will, was done, the whole idea is this is not supposed to be on the taxpayer's back. That was important. How they got the initial seeding or the initial funding was Congress auctioned off spectrum, valuable spectrum, for $7 billion, in which case AT&T and what the National Public Safety Broadband Network operates on, what we call FirstNet, is on band 14. And so there was this initial investment that was made through the auctioning of funds in order to get this huge infrastructure off the ground. And yeah, so the why is really from 9/11. The how is through enactment of legislation and having this oversight. And really, what is intended to happen for the future is that there's going to be this, again, National Public Safety Broadband Network that's going to continue to get investment and improvements to bring public safety the network that they need, and with the components and elements that they have to have in order to provide the life-saving interventions to the communities they serve.
Jumping off of that a little bit, so obviously we're approaching the 25th anniversary of 9/11, which is
Hmm.
what a date on the calendar coming up. But
Crazy, right?
the fact that that was, in a certain sense, where FirstNet was kind of born out of
Yep.
the commission report, and then
Hmm.
standing up FirstNet and growing the iterations to where we are today. You
Hmm.
know, speaking only about where we are today, and we'll get to the future piece, what progress have we made in terms, obviously we've stood up FirstNet, we've started a ton of stuff,
Yeah.
but where would you say FirstNet kind of is today compared to where we were 25 years ago?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to give a little bit of background. One of the once the legislation was put into play, something had to be done, which was literally a Herculean effort. I can't give it any more hyperbolic of an analogy here. It's Herculean. What happened was all fifty states had to, by their own volition, opt in to this national public safety broadband network. And the first question I would pose as we move along, where were we then and where are we now, is in what world do all 50 states agree on much? If anything, right? So I'll leave it up. Maybe there's a few things, but very little. And that's exactly what happened. All 50 states opted in, all the Pacific territories opted in. So that was the first piece that is just absolutely for me mind blowing to get that much unity. We talked about that earlier, you and I, separate from the podcast. So there was that. Then there was the building out of this infrastructure. And there's this huge contract that we have with the federal government. And there's a big add value here, right? There's a ton of accountability, which AT&T, FirstNet built with AT&T, welcomes this accountability. They welcome the First Responder Network Authority bringing this accountability, bringing this scrutiny that you will do what first responders need you to do. And so there was this infrastructure that was built out. So there's this tremendous infrastructure that was built out. There was 190 plus deployments now that are set aside just for first responders. There's priority and preemption now that first responders did not have. I told you Route 91 in 2017, prior to the birth in 2018 of FirstNet, it wasn't there. And there's government oversight. And overall, there is this huge network that's, listen, actions speak louder than words. Proof of concept is what we go for in life. That's a cool idea. Does it work? It works. And it has been working. And it's meeting the contractual obligations and surpassing them. So where we were then was literally at zero. And, I'm an optimistic type of guy. I'm a glass half full type of guy. So I can't give you what the full 25-year is, but I'll give you this analogy. It's going to be continual improvement. So we went from zero to this great thing, but everybody inside of the ecosystem that is FirstNet built with AT&T, the C-suite, the high-level executives, the middle managers, everybody understands FirstNet. They understand. They understand the importance, the relevance to their community, the selfishness, and they want FirstNet to work because they live in a community around the country that they want the first responders to have great communications. And so, where we were was zero. Let's call us roughly in some potentially middle ground, but with this huge runway out in front of us to improve on terrestrial coverage, to improve on satellite coverage, to improve on something called high power user equipment, which is exclusive to and only given by the FCC, by the way, to this network for first responders to use. But constant improvement in those areas for coverage, constant improvement in technology advancements. So, you know, cities like Tulsa, Oklahoma, that have reconnaissance drones can upload and download their information with reliable connectivity, technology like across the country that's used in for the NFL draft. The NFL draft, FirstNet in Pittsburgh this last year, they had over 500,000 people, and FirstNet was there to provide communication. So where we were before was at zero. We're at middle, but there's really no end in sight. Even though there's It's a 25-year contract that went in place in 2018. There's really more runway than I can even see.
So given that where FirstNet is today, I mean, I'd like to dive into that a little bit. What makes FirstNet unique?
Yeah, so there's several kind of fundamental distinctions. One, the underpinning, really the keystone, is what's called priority and preemption. What is that? Imagine yourself anywhere where there's a lot of people trying to access their phone. They're trying to make a call, they're trying to do a video, they're trying to do a text, and the cellular capacity is only so much. You're competing against the other people on your similar network around you. What FirstNet provides is an open network just for them. You can't get on. It's exclusive. In life, we want to be inclusive. We want to include everybody. Not in this case. Not in this case. We only want public safety on there. Why? Because their communication, yes, is prioritized. It means that if firefighter Smith needs to get through on his or her cell phone, that situation that happened to me at Route 91, October 1 of 2017 won't happen. They get through because they have their own network. They're not competing against someone in another network. So priority and preemption, fundamental underpinning of FirstNet. That is singularly the most important, but there are other aspects that are distinguishing factors. I talked about the size and expanse of the network. That's different and definitely valuable. The fact that there is government oversight is a clear line of demarcation. There is nothing else like it. There is an arm of government that takes direct feedback from public safety and doesn't say to FirstNet built with AT, hey guys, we'd really love it if you did this. No, no, no. There are contractual obligations, and there is, you will do this. You will, because this is what public safety needs. This is what a national public safety broadband network is. And this is what we are compelling you to do. And guess what? If you don't do it, there will be penalties. And so that level of scrutiny is an add value. Who doesn't want someone overwatching? Now, you may argue yourself, oh gosh, I don't want to be overwatched in our day-to-day work. We call that, micromanaging. But when you're talking about something like a national public safety broadband network where private enterprise is putting into place, you want that overwatch. And that's exactly what we have. And I can tell you, we welcome it. We welcome that scrutiny. It's really there's some competitiveness to it too. What do I mean by that? That there's pride in it. We supply this to first responders across the country. And guess what? Talk is cheap. And a lot of people can stand and raise their hand and say, we do something pretty cool. We do something pretty cool. But what we're doing that we all think is cool and is prideful for us, the government's saying, yeah, they're doing it because we're making them. So there is that. And then finally, I would say, although there are other couple of distinguishing factors, is the allotment of assets that are specifically set aside for first responders, almost 200 of them across the country. And these are things, we call them compact rapid deployables, which are, think of it as a satellite that connects up into the sky, or a dish that connects up in the sky with a satellite to be able to bring communications out in the middle of nowhere. Wildfire, it could be in a hurricane, it could be in a special event. But, unfortunately, there are man-made errors and calamities. There are natural calamities that can cause problems with the infrastructure. If a tower gets blown over or is burned, or if you ever see those signs in your neighborhood, call before you dig? You ever seen that before? Well, there's a lot of people who don't call before they dig, and if they chop fiber, that can crush your cell coverage too. People don't think about that, right? And so what happens from FirstNet is they can bring assets in to restore communication specifically for public safety contractually. Contractually, there's scrutiny, there's accountability there, which is super important. So I would say those three things are at the top of the list on what distinguishes FirstNet from anything else that could possibly compare themselves.
Yeah, and we agree on the Public Safety Advisory Committee and having the opportunity to
Oh,
have that input and that ability to make sure that the FirstNet network works for
yeah.
first responders has really been critical. I've got two related questions based on one of the things that you mentioned. I'm going to ask them together. You can take them in whatever order you want, but
Cool.
you talked a little bit about priority preemption and a little bit of an example of kind of how that works. But how are departments around the country currently using FirstNet? And then is there one example that really stands out to you on where FirstNet made a difference in a particular situation or event?
Well, I'm going to give you, some of the more recent. I point to. It's easy to point to the NFL draft. There was over 500,000 people in Pittsburgh, and it's vital that communications are ongoing, right? And it's something as small, which seems small, as a phone call from, let's say, a battalion chief to a captain in a fire engine, that you have to have that reliability in that type of a setting. So that's an example. That was very recent. That was in April. But I'll tell you, Michaela, we're at Formula One. We are smack dab in the middle of FIFA planning because of the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people, that will be congregating in certain areas. We are at every Super Bowl. We are at Formula One. We helped in the tragedy in the floods in Texas. And I talked about those assets that we have. Well, we have a wide variety of assets. One of them is amphibious. It's actually pretty cool. It's this pretty neat vehicle that can be in the water and then go on land. So there is a number. I mean, we're at the wildfires. We are at tornadoes. And when you say, what's an agency that comes to mind? Amherst, in Massachusetts, they're very progressive with their FirstNet implementation. Hyannis, Massachusetts, very progressive with their FirstNet implementation and usage. And they have an interesting geography because they help serve, I believe it's Martha's Vineyard. So they have this maritime relationship with their emergency response and having connectivity. Um, Tulsa, Oklahoma is I brought that up before. I used Tulsa, Oklahoma. Their fire chief there, his name's Michael Baker. Very, very, very progressive. And it's hard to understand the example when you never have to use it. In other words, I talk about this priority and preemption. It kind of feels like pie in the sky because you don't really understand it. In emergency services is a situation. Everything for me is food. It's like you want to have it and not need it, but not need it and not have it, right? And in emergency response, you don't want to be caught in an area of congestion where, oh my gosh, I can't get through. Because what was there for us before, me as a fire chief, I would have this is for landline. We would have what's called GETS. It is Government Emergency Telecommunications Service or System. It's a landline. So imagine Armageddon happening. Well, I pick up this big brick of a phone. I go boop, boop, boop. I dial a number and a code, and then supposedly I'm able to get through. Well, let me just tell you, if there is, what, hitting the fan, do you want to pick up a phone and dial a number? No. Well, now there is a similar hit star 272 for wireless connectivity. Who wants to do that? You don't want to pick up a phone, hit star, bop, bop, bop. That's why the National Public Safety Broadband Network is so important. There's never a code to press in. It's always on. It's tested. It's tried. It's true. And, there are just so many important facets to FirstNet. That's why I'm so passionate about it, because it's just so It's not a nicety, it's a necessity. It's not a nicety, it's a necessity for first responders.
So you mentioned Oklahoma, Tulsa, and Chief Baker, and I do have to say that they actually just won our CFSI Massimo Excellence in Fire Service Based EMS Award at this past CFSI dinner. So lots going on in Oklahoma, and shout out to Chief Baker and the department for the work that they're
Yeah,
doing all
big
across
time,
the board.
big
Um,
time.
yeah, it's an impressive group. But
It is.
to focus us back in a little bit on FirstNet, um, are there any obstacles that departments that you find that they face in adopting some of these technologies?
Yeah. So, I mean, first, I think it's important to note, you got to have adequate coverage, in the area. So, first is that coverage there, right? So, I think that that's the first obstacle for any fire chief to ensure that that coverage is there. Now, I will argue that if your coverage is there, you're putting yourself at an extreme liability to not be on FirstNet. Most of the fatality, most of the injuries that happen at any emergency incident, 9/11 is a great example, is communications related. And when you have a network that's solely for first responders, it has government oversight, it has the X, the Y, and the Z, these facets that make it unique, and you're not on it. Um, that could be a problem. So the first answer to the question is do you have coverage? The second, I think, challenge is really understanding what FirstNet is. And it is not just another telecommunications network. It is unique. It is a unicorn, in fact. It is a unicorn. It is the only network that's a National Public Safety National Public Safety Broadband Network. There's only one. There's only one with priority and preemption. And here's another one. There's only one that the FCC has said that because your communications is so important that we are going to allow you to have different equipment on this network that projects and magnifies power 6 times more power than any other piece of equipment. And it's called high power user equipment. Okay. First responders only on band 14, only on band 14, can they have this high power user equipment. What is high power user equipment? Okay. So you have a signal coming from a tower and it's going to my device. Well, as I drive away, there's a limit to the signal. Well, the high power user equipment allows your phone, we'll use the phone as an example, to reach back through the amplitude of the power back to that tower to make sure it stays connected. Now, that may seem like a small thing, but one must ask themselves, if everything is the same, why wouldn't the FCC permit or allow anybody else to do it? The answer is because there's a distinctive difference. And this network is only for first responders. And it's crucial. It all makes sense. Like when you walk through the logic model, it all makes absolute sense. But I think that, as you ask, what are the challenges? First challenge, got to make sure you have coverage. Second is you have to really understand and sift through the misinformation, the disinformation that exists on why would I be on FirstNet? Is it really exclusive? And it is, but there's first responders have a whole heck of a lot to deal with. They're just the magnitude of the burden. I don't want to get into too much hyperbole here, but fire chiefs, police chiefs, firefighters, police officers, emergency managers, they're bearing not just the weight of themselves and their people. It's the community. Anybody worth their salt, they get into a role like that, and it's above self. It's above self. You're thinking about the community, and that's what they're focused on, right? So sometimes there isn't enough. There's only so much cognitive load we can all have, and when you're really evaluating a situation like that, community, sometimes the nuances that FirstNet isn't easy to see. And so there's a challenge there because sometimes there's an education gap, an information gap, as I mentioned before. So I think that that you got to make sure that the coverage is there, which there most places FirstNet is. You have to make sure that the proper information is there. And then I think you also have to have the training and the utilization there for your first responders to really understand their capabilities and what they're doing. And so, just like many things in life, I think educating, information sharing, knowledge management plays a role here in adoption for FirstNet, and continues to be something that we try to peck away at. But I think that across the country, there's more than 30,000 agencies and well over 7 million connections. So more and more public safety agencies are coming on board and understanding and seeing the value, right? You guys see the value. And so I think while it will always be a part of our really something that we have to achieve, this education, this information sharing, I think it is getting better, but those are some of the challenges.
Do you find that there are differences in how departments of different types or sizes are able to interact with FirstNet?
In rural areas, just like many other aspects of society, access is their biggest challenge, which what I mean by that is having coverage. And that is also a distinction of FirstNet. And it's also helped and driven by the First Responder Network Authority. Like, for example, I don't want to get too far over my skis with this, but they're putting on what's called coverage enhancement workshops. So they're going to public safety and they're saying, hey, where do you need more coverage? And they're gathering that feedback out in the field and saying, okay, all right, we're going to look at here. And they're using these reinvestments from AT&T, and even the most recent that was announced at the end of March, another $2 billion investment, which really correlates to speed of implementation, which there's value in that. There's a huge value, billions of dollars, in fact, right? We know that we know that time is money. We know about time value of money. The fact remains that $2 billion more, reinvested into a network to increase things like coverage, which, is, again, that's one of the soft spots in rural areas. When you talk about, densities in urban space, sometimes in-building coverage can be a challenge for any number of different factors. So I think for both rural and urban departments, understanding what FirstNet is and isn't, and understanding the tools that you have at your disposal to increase that connectivity and coverage is really important. And just like most things for me in life, having a better understanding, a better knowledge base, being well informed helps you as you face any challenge. But I think that at times can be part of the challenge in both rural and in the urban interface. And sometimes in the rural and in the urban interface, there are solutions that exist that they just aren't aware of. So maybe in 2018, when we just started FirstNet, it wasn't so great. In which case, as I mentioned, why would you be on the network? But now it's robust, it's better. And so part of the challenge is thinking that the coverage isn't there when in fact it is. And at the end of the day, what I would advocate for and what I do is, hey, listen, Chief X, Y, or Z, have someone come out and evaluate and see if your coverage is sufficient in this particular area, whether it be rural or wherever. And then you can make an informed decision. You want to arm public safety with the ability to make a really, really good decision. And it's part of what I try to do personally and what I try to connect them to. So those are some of the things that I think from a rural and urban department perspective.
So you had also, several times throughout this conversation, we've talked about constant improvement and what it's taken to get to where we are today, and also how FirstNet's bringing that attitude into the future. So my question for you is, looking 5 years out, where do you see FirstNet and public safety communications going?
Yeah. Well, first, we're endeavoring right now. We're bringing in low Earth orbital satellites. We're partnered with a company called AST, and we believe that direct to device, meaning that satellite, instead of going through a different spot and then to your phone, it's going to go direct to your device. We think that that's going to be a huge game changer because it's going to allow better flexibility, better agility for the men and women that are actually out in the field. They're going to be able to receive and provide voice calls. They're going to be able to receive and move data. So that's going to be huge, and you're going to see that over the course of the next 2 years. This constellation is going to be laid out, and it's going to be a smaller constellation. Why is that a benefit? Well, as we go, I'll use this situation. We were driving into um, Utah an awful lot last year uh, to visit my son in Salt Lake City, and in between cell towers, sometimes your call can drop or you can get spotty coverage, right? Well, in constellations, the theory is similar. The more satellites you have, the greater opportunity. Well, with a smaller constellation, but with bigger square footage, these AST satellites, these Bluebird satellites are, I believe it's 2,400 square feet. They're enormous. So there's these enormous satellites. So it requires less of them, and requiring less of them could improve drops in between coverage. So I think that's important. So we have the satellite coverage. That's number one. And number two, as I mentioned before, it's this constant reinvestment, constant reinvestment. So we talk about the terrestrial towers, the new HPUE equipment. Recently in the last I think it's like 6 months to a year, maybe it's 8 months, we've come out with the Mega Connect. Well, what is that? That's high power user equipment that's super small, so it's portable. So that's important for the men and women. I'll use here in Clark County as an example. We have the urban center that everybody knows about, the Strip, and all the things that are Las Vegas Boulevard, but we're on the outskirts of Clark County, and Las Vegas is Red Rock. So you got people that are hiking, biking, and doing things, off the grid, so to speak. And you know for first responders, their ability to have a little compact type HPUE is super important. So I think, as we look into the future, further innovations, further feedback from public safety, what is it that the men and women truly need? And versatility, agility, flexibility is a big piece of that. And then, items and equipment like Fusion. We're launching this mission critical push to talk piece of equipment that we believe is going to be a huge game changer. Has the ability, you talk about interoperability, and that's a foreign word to people, and maybe means some things to some people and different things to others. Where we're talking about is the ability for your portable radio, your land mobile radio, to be able to interconnect with cellular service, LTE service, and that's what this equipment is going to be able to do. It's going to be able to blend them together. So you're going to have the ability for a firefighter, police officer, emergency manager, EMT, you name it. They're going to have the ability to use Fusion in a standardized mission critical push to talk piece of equipment that can toggle seamlessly between the spectrum for LMR, land mobile radio, on their portable radio, and LTE, all from their phone. So we think that that's going to be a huge game changer. But I can tell you this: AT&T is an innovator. They want to keep up. They want to be ahead. At the same token, though, they want to do it right. What I mean by that is they're not necessarily trying to be the first. They want to bring a robust, quality product to the end user, which we're talking about public safety here. They want firefighters, police officers, all the first responders they mentioned. They want them to have the best. They want them to have the most robust. And that's super important. As I think about my time in public safety, and you just want this. And again, it goes back to food. Do I want to go to Cheesecake Factory where all these different items, I could choose from so much? Or do I want to go to a restaurant with just two items on them? I want a bigger choice selection. So I really, you know what I mean? And as a first responder, you want a large choice selection. You may not always have to upload video, but it goes back to what I said before. Do you want to need it and not have it, or have it and not need it? And that's where FirstNet do it with AT&T is trying to go. They want to bring quality. They want to bring assortment and variety, because they know that, you got to be able to MacGyver an emergency incident. You can't just rely on kind of one thing. You want to have all these things at your disposal. And so I just think we're going to see more innovation. We're going to see more investment. We're going to see it in areas of equipment. We're going to see it in areas of specifically equipment, HPUE. We're going to see even more robust in the satellite realm, and really in terrestrial towers. I just think that there's a comprehensive approach to what the future brings, and it's going to be a relentless pursuit of excellent and improvement, all for public safety.
So given the, as you say, the relentless pace of change of technology and the plethora of options, and there's a lot out there, which is good. You want options, you want choice. But, my question for you is, what advice would you give fire service leaders about preparing for the future of communications?
Yeah, get involved. I think that that's a piece of the puzzle. Get involved, get informed. Those two kind of go hand in hand. And I can tell you that we want that. There is, that the old adage that, the room is smarter than any one person. The more, crowdsourcing, that's kind of a sexy kind of terminology, right? Pulling in all the brain power and all of the wants and needs of more public safety is only going to make us better. We need more input. We need more understanding constantly. We need it all. So getting involved, getting informed that's at the top of the list. And again, I know it's easier said than done, because I can appreciate where each person is in their law enforcement, first responder, public safety kind of career, but it's so important. Communication, it's not hyperbole. I mean, you could do your own independent research. It's always at the top of the list. What went wrong on this incident? Well, it's going to be communications. It's going to be some level of communication. So getting informed and getting involved. Like I said, there's any number of ways to get involved. We're at a luxury. You mentioned the Public Safety Advisory Committee, which is a subset of the board. Trying to get involved at that level. There's a new chair to the First Responder Network Authority, the authority board, Chief Atkinson, who's just the right person to have, the Sheriff Atkinson, I should say. He's the right person to have at the tip of the spear. You have Tricia Wolford. She's on that board, and she's a fire chief at Anne Arundel County. I mean, you have public safety entrenched in spaces to help, but they need input. They need people to get involved. They need to hear from public safety. What do you need? So yeah, I guess I kind of droned on a bit, but get involved and get informed. I would tell any fire chief, police chief, emergency manager when it comes to communications.
That's the battle we all face, right? Is it's
Sure.
doing the job in the day to day, and there's so many compelling things to focus on moment to moment that you have to. That's the heart of the job, but there's also a ton of um, relevance and pre-planning and strategy, and you can only do that if you're involved in sharing your information, because people can't make the right strategy decisions if they don't have all of the information involved. But finding the time to share it can always be complicated. But I definitely agree with you that the national organizations want it, the advisory committees want it. That's the way that we all do better, is when you know better, and you can only know better when you hear about what is better. So that's
100%.
definitely something I think we're all striving for.
Sure.
I know we've had really a wide-ranging conversation here, but what haven't we covered, if anything, that you really want folks listening to this podcast to know?
I would probably double tap on a couple things. We talked about just recently, getting informed and getting involved. I think that that's important, and specifically about what FirstNet is and what FirstNet isn't. It is distinctive. It is different. There are things that people could argue in similarity. There is only one national public safety broadband network. There is only one network with priority and preemption. There is only one network with federal government oversight, with incredible accountability, with hundreds of reports that have to be conducted. There is only one network with dedicated deployables. And we talked about priority and preemption. And so I think it's really about double tapping on the things that we are and how it can be useful to a first responder. We're not perfect. Okay. There is no perfection does not exist in this world. There is a relentless striving for excellence. Here's, I think, again, double tapping. We can say that, but we have this oversight that ensures we're going to do it. That is just so important. The final thing I will say, it is our mission to ensure that public safety is mission ready. Our mission is to make sure they're mission ready, and that's not going to change.
Based on our conversation, what's one thing that you want firefighters and EMS professionals to remember about FirstNet?
That is different and unique. Yeah, that's different and unique for those reasons I mentioned, but it's different and unique.
So we had a side conversation about unity and getting involved and staying involved. And if anyone has questions about what we've covered here, how can they get in touch?
Yeah, they certainly could email me. That would be great. And at jeffrey.buchanan@att.com. I would be glad to have any conversation, welcome any conversation. And while I might not have all the answers, I can tell you that up front, but I can connect people to the right individuals, whether it be in their region, or their area to help them get the answers that they need.
I think that sounds like a plan, and I certainly think our listeners will appreciate the ability to send their questions your way. And it's all about getting connected, right? And making sure that we're
Definitely.
finding the spots that we can get information.
100%.
Well, Chief, thank you so much for being here and for having this conversation. I think there's so much changing in terms of technology and communications, and with FirstNet specifically, and with the larger situation of first responder interoperable communications writ large. So the ability to have this conversation at this moment in time has been, I think, really meaningful, and looking forward to the future. There's so much to look forward to.
Yeah, well, it's been a privilege, Michaela. Love the opportunity to talk about FirstNet and have this discussion. I think it's super important. And thanks a lot for having me. Really appreciate it.